Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining the webinar today. As you know, the topic of today's session is OODA, which is a powerful reboot tool to use under uncertainty and unpredictability. And today's presenter of the session is Mr. Shakti Ghosal. He is an alumnus of 84 batch. Sir's profile is like he's an engineer and a management professional. He possesses more than 3.5 decade experience with profit center, business development strategy, negotiation. And for over a decade, he has been actively mentoring and coaching managers and executives to support them in their performance and career growth. And he's also a professional certified coach, which is a PCC credential, and he's currently the managing director, India, Gulf, and Middle East for Empath Inco worldwide. He runs leadership workshop, coaching programs for organization as a part of his commitments to develop and upgrade leadership incubation globally. Some of his clients are L&T, Heavy Engineering, RP, Sanjeev Goenka Group, and Aramex worldwide. He is also a visiting professor at IIM Udaipur, IIM Kashipur, and IIM Nagpur. The topic is, brief about the topic is like, it is the model, which it's a loop first articulated by US Colonel John Boyd, and it's observe, orient, decide, and act. That's the full form of OODA, that's the topic of the today's session. And a special welcome, sir, Shakti sir, to today's session. And over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Sushma. Thank you for your kind words. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I can't see too many of you, but I could see some of you coming in. So thank you once again for taking the time out today afternoon. Let's see how interesting and how relevant we could make today's session. So as Sushma said, we are going to talk about a very powerful reboot tool. And why are we talking about that today? Because, as the pandemic continues and as businesses continue to try and reboot to a new normal, each of us would actually be entering a space of uncertainty and unpredictability. And this is where this OODA tool becomes extremely relevant, as we will try to showcase today. 1 minute, I don't know why it is not moving. One minute, please. Yeah, something had got stuck, technology sometimes plays true on. Now, in its simplest form, as you can see, it is very straightforward. It is observe, orient, decide, and act. So, we know all this. We have actually studied this, in our straightforward management programs. What is the current situation? So you are essentially doing a kind of a SWOT there. How far is it to your destination? So you try to sort of see the gap there. What is the kind of path that you're going to take? And eventually, what is your action plan? That's very straightforward. I think all of us do that. What is very interesting about this tool is, I don't know, something, there is a message here. You cannot control, I don't know what this is. I think I need to decline this, sorry, I think there are these short messages coming, and I would request people to just not send them now because we are into the presentation. Now, this particular tool originally was envisaged, or in fact created, by John Boyd. He was an Air Force colonel in the US Air Force. And interestingly, a very interesting aside is, John Boyd also actually created something called a ENQUIRY, which is an energy maneuverability theory for the Air Force, which led to the creation of some iconic aircraft, the F-15, the F-16, and A-10. But that's an aside. What is particularly, interesting about this loop is that at another level, it transforms into an extremely powerful means of handling uncertainty and unpredictability, and that's what we are going to actually be getting into. As you know, as we get into an uncertain, unpredictable situation, I don't know why this is getting stuck all the time. I think people, when they, yeah. So just I'm trying to check if it is working. Yeah. So what happens in such a situation is there is no experiential background that we have to be able to decide what is the way forward. So we actually start using some earlier, processes, systems, mental models that we may be having. And that is where I think sometimes the problem comes in. And that is what this tool is actually all about. There are three premises here really which the OODA has. The first one is that, as the world continues to change, as the environment continues to shift, we sometimes, are conditioned to hold on, or rather hold our perspective in a manner that we try to make sense of the changed world as if it is the world that we already were into. So when a new piece of data or information comes in, we somehow forcibly fit it into that mind model or the mental model that we hold, and we try to find a solution or a pathway. That we fail because obviously what we are trying to do here. We therefore actually hunker down. We then believe that there is something wrong with the way I did it, and I try to do it again in a much more maybe rigid fashion, and I don't allow new information to come in, and I fail again. So to make sense of a changing world, the first premise is you need to be able to shift your mind models, and how to do that is what we will see, as we go through. The second is, our intrinsic failure to observe reality. We are people who have done, and all of us, I think, have done physics. So we have actually read about the Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. At its core, what it means is that when I look at a set of data or a particular domain with a lot of focus, I end up actually becoming uncertain about another set of variables. And that is the Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. And the third aspect is the second law of thermodynamics, which we know that in a closed system, and the law actually postulates, the level of entropy keeps on increasing. What is entropy? Entropy is nothing but the disorder, the level of disorder, or the uncertainty, or even in a stronger word, I may use the word chaos, that keeps on increasing. Way to handle this and to way to decrease that entropy is to bring in new energy, or in this case, new information, new data. So these are the three premises on which the OODA loop really is based. Now, what we are going to do is look at this loop through a particular industry, and I've chosen the aviation industry because, as you would realize, this is one industry which has been impacted possibly the most. The worst hit industries, as we go through what we are going through today. So let's see how you could apply it to this particular industry. The larger version of the OODA loop is something like this, and I want you to please see this a little carefully, and we will actually be looking at each of the stages, and we are going to actually apply it to the industry we just now spoke about, the aviation industry. Look at the observe. The observe stage is where all the data is coming in, right? So we have certain mental models, certain outdated information, which is part of those models. We actually then are seeing new data information that is coming in, as we observe. New circumstances. So there are several things that you are doing here. You are asking such questions, that what is the impact of the current situation on me? What is the possible future impact of the current situation? What could be the direct impacts to me? What kind of circumstances are shifting and so on and so forth. These are the kind of questions that you actually ask in this stage. Let's look at this observe stage a little more in detail. So the mechanics is, like I said, as you get the new information and, as the second law of thermodynamics actually tells us, we start shifting from a closed system, which we sometimes, are prone to. That I look at my processes, systems, the way I've been doing because it worked for me for the last 10 years, and I do it again. And I try to fit that new data into the same process and the same system. But as this new data comes in, I then become amenable to opening up the system. This supports what we the third, as we see this new data coming in, we gain the ability to start seeing situations differently. As we link this into our mental models, that new piece of information, as long as I'm open to make that change, I can start shifting, putting that data, recreating the mind model, and then comes in, it sort of induces, or rather, it sort of reduces the mental entropy which otherwise we get into when we are into a closed system. Now, you will see that the looping is taking place from various stages. Observe, you will get information flows coming in from all the stages, particularly from the final stage of the action and the decide stage when you are taking a decision. So, that continuous flow of the information into the loop, and that's why it is actually called the OODA loop. Now, I want you to please think and try and make sense of, like I asked certain questions. I would like you to go back into your industry. While we will be looking at the aviation industry, I want you to go back into the industry you're working in and try and answer those questions for yourself. We, in a larger workshop format, we would actually do that, and we would actually, articulate those on a piece of paper. But here we don't have the time, but I would encourage you to do that. Now, if you want to be looking at the aviation industry, what is it, what kind of questions, what kind of data that we might see that might be coming in? Let's look at those. For example, you might be asking, what shifts in various things? Demography, the traveler demography, the buyer behavior. You may sort of, the traveler behavior, the regulations, technology are taking place that might directly affect my airline. So if I am Indigo, I need to ask this question. For example, you may actually find an answer that when you look at demography, and you may find that in the new normal, for quite a while, business travel might actually shrink. That is the front end, the business class and the first class kind of travels which are there, in at least in the international route, because mostly people have got accustomed to having video conferencing and video chats, and maybe that part of it might shrink. The traveler age in terms of, if I were to demographically look at the age, then it could be the senior age people may be traveling less because of fear. So you have, the younger age people, maybe that percentage might really grow. The long-term booking behavior, which was there in terms of trying to get a better price and all, may just not be there because there is an uncertainty out there, and so on and so forth. I'm just trying to sort of try and make you think in terms of what kind of questions you may be asking and how those new answers may actually start forming the new information base that you have. What changes in the environment are taking place that might impact our airline and our business now or later on? Changes could be, for example, which we see today, could be in terms of even certain routes, certain kinds of businesses may have shrunk, which means it might actually impact my route. I think that information to actually start taking all kinds of. Look at these questions and see how you can apply them to your own business. What information do we have? You may be seeking in terms of routing options. We just spoke. So, is there a shift? Is there a change there? Deployment, which airlines were sort of wanting to go it alone, but maybe we are into a new normal where alliances may open up. We may not have seen them early strategy. Cost profits, these are fundamental, but what is the shift happening there? So, that is a question that you will actually ask in the observe stage. Let's look at the orient stage now. And this, is possibly a very interesting stage and possibly the most important one. Why I say it is the most important is this is actually the heart, the engine of the OODA loop. And why does it make it the engine? Because your mental models are all residing here. This is where you actually start shifting the mental models, changing them, and creating new mental models, so to enable you to see the changing situation and the environment in a much better way. And we will see how that can be done. But look at what is happening here. You are getting the data. And one more thing, about the observe stage, I think I need to sort of maybe emphasize because that has a bearing here. The two things that happen there. The Heisenberg's principle of uncertainty. So as I start looking at one particular kind of data, another set of data actually can become quite uncertain in terms of my ability to massage it, my ability to use it. That unfortunately is the sense of reality that each one of us holds. We sort of go with what we believe is important and we sort of then forego what we believe is not. So that leads to dilution of the kind of data that is coming in, number one. Number two, equally important is, with a lot of data coming in, you sometimes lose out on trying to make sense of or differentiate between the signals and the noise. A lot of data comes in which may not have a great bearing, but it's sort of confusion. It becomes a forest, and then I start sort of losing the ability to actually identify those correct. Remember, all the time, our mental models, which are there formed based on our past experiences, our belief systems, and everything, even things like, my cultural tradition. So I, in India, would actually, using the same data form, may actually look at things differently to a guy who's in Germany. I mean, we understand that, don't we? So that's where the cultural moorings and the impacts actually come in. So all that is creating, and this data and these mental models are essentially there for me to make fast decisions. So past experience, new data, my culture, something called the genetic heritage, very important, interesting term, but it is very important again in terms of, way my mind models are there. Now, what you need to do is you start breaking apart old mental models. You actually need to break them apart, and this is a practice. Every morning as you see new information coming in, you need to have that flexibility. Look, what worked yesterday may not work today. So let me see with this new data, how can it shift my mind model, or the way I am, my ability to be able to see emerging situations and circumstances. So we do what is called as a destructive deduction, and then we do creative induction, which is I use some parts of the old mental models, I bring in some parts of the new information and create a new mental model, to be able to observe what is out there. In all this, of course, we cannot lose sight of the fact that there are certain intrinsic competencies or capabilities that I have as an organization or as an individual or as a team, and those are very essential. Those also play a very, very important role in terms of how I'm going to now orient myself in terms of what is orientation at the end of the day. It is basically making a judgment. Somewhere, when we do case studies in business schools and all that, and somehow we, many of us get this thinking that, okay, when I have a lot of data, I can analyze it and I can sort of plan. So what actually is needed is not so much reliance on data. Data is important. Information is important. But how do I judge? If I were to be looking at the data, a great amount of data to a fantastic judgment, I would choose the latter. Because judging using good mental models based on insufficient data is a great thing to happen. Let's just see how this could be done. And I want you to imagine now. Okay, just imagine this, okay? I'll bring in some pictures. Imagine you are on the Alps or on the Himalayas, and you're skiing. Imagine you are in Kerala, or it could be Florida or wherever, and you are on this jet boat. Imagine, there is a bicycle and somebody is, riding the bicycle. And imagine that you have taken a child, maybe your child, or if you don't have somebody, to a toy store, and the child looks in a very fascinating manner at this toy tank. Imagine these four things. Now, I want you to shift that imagination like this. Now remove the skis. Remove the skis, but you are still in the Alps or the Himalayan slopes. Remove the onboard motor. Remove the cycle handles. And remove the rubber or plastic threads of the toy tank. Please now see what I have removed: the skis, the onboard motor, the handle, and the threads. I've removed these four things. Now, what emerges? The question that I would like you to think is, what emerges when you put all these removed parts together? And very interesting. I mean, we could sort of discuss this further, but since this is a webinar, let's straight away. If you start thinking how you could put these parts together, you'll find that you could put it together as a snowmobile. Snowmobile, because I did mention, if you recall, that I'm still on the Alps or on the Himalayan slopes. So this is how a mental model and the creative induction, and this is a nice, just an example, but we need to practice this. We need to practice this every day. We wake up, as you see from information, I should have that flexibility in my mind to create new mental models. Let's see how an inquiry looks like when you start, working in the orient stage. So you've got the data in. What are you doing? You are trying to shift models, trying to see how things could be done in a different way. So with shifting customer profile, buying traveler behaviors, which we saw in the observe stage, how do you evaluate and finalize ticket price, manage sale inventory, do your refunds and exchange? What kind of new process you might have? You might like to think of supplier payments. In view of new safety protocols, and there are many as we know, how do you optimize check-in process? Improve efficiency of airport operations, because there is a lot of rigidity in terms of how the flights are, less flights, but of course huge checking happening of all the passengers. And so how do you improve efficiency of airport operations? Make flight operations most cost effective. Questions like that. As your customer mindset shifts relating to travel, like how do you optimize your route network, deploy capacity, enter into alliances with other airlines? And there are of course new regulatory frameworks which are coming in. So what you would like to then maybe look at in terms of new method systems, new mental models. How do you engage with government and regulatory authorities for creating standards? Hygiene is very important now. Standards of operations. How do you ensure an overall smooth customer experience? This is the kind of thinking that you would do. I would again encourage you in your own domain, look at these questions and try and work back and see how these questions could fit into your own domain. Let's look at the stage of decide now. The decide stage, and if you'll see, we have used within brackets hypothesis. Why? Because this is where the possibilities have got created. As you have got your observation as far as your industry is concerned, your domain is concerned, and you then now have to take a decision. You have various alternatives. You have to take a decision. So you will eventually choose an alternative which, based on your judgment, seems to be the best, right? But you need not worry about it. You need not worry about it. Why I say this is that the decision making, as far as the OODA loop is concerned, is a constant, continuous process. So you actually will not only look at the inputs coming in from the previous stages, you will eventually see how those decisions have sort of shown up in the final stage, and then you loop backwards, and you always have a possibility to keep on shifting how you need to do, and then keep on doing that. Let's see the kind of inquiry questions that would come in this particular stage. For example, now you have to make a decision. So you will, let's say you want to take a decision in terms of the booking process. So you might be looking at that in terms of what would inspire customer confidence, fairness, deploy. What internal resource group you may need to create to work with governments and regulators to ensure smooth, consistent, safe customer experience, and alliances and marketing partnerships. Various things which you would look at in terms of this particular third stage. Let's look at the last stage, which is the action stage. The action stage, you see, it is written, within bracket, it is written as test. Why we say this is that this is while a final decision is getting acted upon in this stage. It is also a very important learning stage, because what you do and the data that you are going to be getting as you act goes back to your observe stage and actually then feeds into the data that is there to again come back through the loop. And this loop continues on and on and on until when? till of course either the whatever was the obligation or this objective is fulfilled, or you decide to disengage. So fundamentally, what is happening here is that you observe, you get as much data as possible, you shift the signals out of the noise, you change your mind mental models by asking certain questions about your own operations, you create hypotheses and you take the decision, you take actions, and then as you act, you then start getting certain reporting of the things. Reference accounting, very important. Interline billing. So if you're there, so interline billing is when you have alliance partners, then you know how much effectiveness of each of these adds back into that loop, into that OODA loop. Now you may ask that, okay, I do this OODA loop, but how do I gain an advantage over competitors? I'm let's say I'm nothing for Indigo, but let's say I'm Indigo and I want to gain a competitive advantage against and what you do actually is you use the loop and you start using it faster and faster, which essentially means that you don't get bogged down into too much of this thing analysis. You keep on doing quite a few things intuitively because there is no past experience. You have to be observing, orienting yourself, taking a decision, and then acting. So as you move faster and faster than your competitors, what happens is, you actually do things that the competitor then suddenly is pushed back into the observe stage. He gets pushed back in his OODA loop, and because he doesn't understand some of your actions. So it is always better to loop yourself faster than your opposition, than your competition. So you would create a data repository for use in any phase, and it becomes very important here because you are collecting, connecting, and testing data. What kind of inquiry would you do here? This is where analytics come in. For example, you could be using data analytics. So your airline generates a large volume of data. So how could you use that analytics in terms of collating and analyzing the data for the various stages, observing and orient stages? How, for example, a question could come. How could you synchronize your pre-departure processes, like check-in, flight operations, airport operations, and so on, with real-time shifts in market conditions and on performance? No airline does this. But in the new normal, maybe an airline needs to start thinking of doing this. Can I make it much more dynamic? How could I, for example, do inventory-based dynamic pricing, so up to flight departure, to force competitors review their pricing strategy? Again, this is the part of the observe and orient stage. It's really a kind of in the Chinese there's a word called Tao. It's a way of thinking. OODA is nothing but a way of thinking. You sort of orient yourself, you practice, you keep on practicing, you will see your loop speed going up, you will see the efficacy of your decision making becoming better. And this is all we have, whether we like it or not, this is all we have in a new normal where there is no past precedence for us to move forward on. So this essentially is what the OODA loop is all about. And so let's try and sort of just contextualize and revise some of the things which we did just now. Number one, you need to shift from this mindset, oh, but I'm into all kinds of trouble. Let me hunker down and whatever I know, I will use that and my systems and processes to try and find a solution. The closed system mindset is definitely inferior to an open mindset. it's important to shift our thinking. I've seen in the past, and I worked close to 40 years in organizations, and I mean, it's happened to me. We get nervous and we hunker down. We need to do exactly the opposite. You need to rebuild your deterministic screen. Deterministic screen is nothing but that model. What does a mental model do? Because based on the judgment that I am applying at that stage, it allows me to see the situation in a manner that some of that situation gets highlighted, some of that situation which I believe is not that important gets dulled. So I'm able to focus on that highlighted, that critical, relevant, as per me, relevant part of the situation for me to sort of make a judgment. And of course, I only can do this when I do destructive deduction and creative induction. In that small example of the snowmobile which we saw, but you need to train yourself. This is the heart of the OODA loop. You need to keep on having the mindset that I am going to be shifting every piece of relevant data. If I'm not able to fit into my mind model, I know that the model itself needs to be changed, not that I force that data into that model. Decide and act are learning systems. There is no final conclusion here. It's a loop. So you keep on doing this, and you keep on testing new hypotheses. Because in a shifting world, the environment keeps on shifting. You would have read about in marketing, there's this very classic piece, Marketing Myopia, right? Theodore Levitt wrote it, I think, 60, 70 years back, and so relevant because he actually, while he used it in the context of marketing, he actually was saying the same thing, that you need to shift your mindset and you need to keep it as a learning system for you to start testing new hypotheses in a constantly shifting world. And finally, you increase your OODA looping speed to gain a competitive advantage over competitors. So that, ladies and gentlemen, is all there is. And so I'm open to questions. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to take them now. I'll just pull out my video from here. Now I can see myself. Okay, Shishma, would you like to share some chat box questions or something? Or anybody? You can unmute people and people can ask.
I just have questions and then
Okay.
Yeah.
You want me to go back to some slide? Anybody wants me to go back and explain something? I'm happy to do that also.
If you want to ask, I would request them to come in a chat window. I can unmute them.
Okay, somebody is saying, question 2.
How do you account for an emotional quotient in the processor?
How do you? Can you ask that question again?
How do you account for the emotional quotient in the process?
That's a great question. Emotional quotient. So we are actually talking about the impact of, let's say, my relational intelligence. I'm using a slightly different word that comes in. And the relational intelligence or the emotional quotient, as you asked, is of course very critical. You actually are using it as part of the orient stage. In the orient stage, as you are creating that mental model, you are doing one more thing, which maybe I did not articulate it because the loop doesn't talk about it, but the concerns and the thoughts of all your stakeholders, they come in to create that mental model which you use to look at your data and then create a judgment. Did I answer your question? Hello?
Yeah, sir. So I think they are not on mute. Yeah, the next question is how to identify intelligence quotient, sir.
How to identify intelligence? I'm not very clear how this question has anything to do with this particular presentation. I mean, can the gentleman or whoever it is clarify what exactly is he asking? I
So
mean,
once
how
again, let me unmute. Try to.
Yeah, you can unmute. You can unmute people. Yeah.
Ashish Patel. Yeah, Ashish Patel, you want to go
Ashish,
ahead
would
and
you like to ask question? Ask your question again.
Ashish Patel. Sir, I have unmuted him. He is not talking.
Okay, but some other people are asking something on the chat box. Can you just see, please? Because I saw some chats coming in.
Yes, sir. Next question is how to identify one stakeholder perception in the process.
Well, I mean, I don't know who asked this, but stakeholders are the classic stakeholders. So who are your stakeholders? So let's say if you are part of you're part of a gig team, let's say. So your stakeholders are your other team members. Your stakeholders are the overall organization, people who are involved, or at least, let's say, people to whom you report to and the people who report to you. Your stakeholders are your clients. Your stakeholders could be your vendors. Your stakeholders could be, and your stakeholders are also anyone and everyone who has a stake in your particular decision. They are your stakeholders. It could be people who are creating maybe governmental legislation in a slightly distant fashion. They are also a stakeholder. So all these stakeholders. Now you may not be able to know every time, oh, what is the stakeholder thinking, but you have a sense of what the stakeholder actually wants. You have a sense of his or her concerns, and you actually bring in that sense as part of your mental model which you are creating in that orient stage. Anyone else? You know, I would really encourage each person who's come here, and I'm sure most of you are working in organizations. Please, it's a very simple model, but please do one thing, if at least one thing you can do, which is develop this mindset of flexibility to change your mental models. We rigidify our mental models. You know, in whatever domain, I've seen this happening to myself, and I've seen this happening to almost everyone I've come across. You know, because I did this, you know, I have this 15 years experience, 10 years, you know, I'm a domain expert. And I know how it is, you know, I know everything about this domain. Your knowing everything about the domain still does not allow you to make a great judgment when you are confronted with a shifting world, when a world is moving into a new normal. It does not. What allows you is that flexibility of mind to allow new information, new data to come in. And the data could be quite unrelated to your domain. But I should be able to make sense. Can it sort of add value? Does it detract value out of what my way of thinking, my mental model is? That is what it is. Anyone else?
So they are asking to share first. Someone has missed it. The first slide.
Share which one? Share which one?
First slide, first one. They joined late.
Okay, first slide. Okay, I'll just do that. 1 minute, please. Yeah, first slide wasn't much really. It was just basically I was showcasing the OODA as a toolbox, and this is the first slide. So you know what I again repeat, the OODA actually operates at 2 levels. Many of us would actually have heard about OODA, but usually OODA is explained in this manner. So it's doing a current situation SWOT. It is trying to find the gap to my destination. It is finally taking a decision about what kind of pathway or way I need to do, and what is my action plan. This is the OODA loop, but really the OODA loop is far stronger when you start using these premises which I talked about. And the final OODA loop is really this.
So someone is asking, repeat the act slides also. Act slides. Can you just show that?
Act slide. Okay. Okay. Act slide. Okay. After the last stage, that's why this is the act slide.
I hope someone asked Weber. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Somebody is saying something here. Will you say something? I couldn't read it.
Dev Malia Chatterjee, I hope you are seeing the slide. Yeah, so it will be there for some time, guys. And then I think you can please note if this session recording will be uploaded on IIMB Alumni webinar channel. So later you can share and also check. So next question is from Jairam Krishna. He's asked, how do you predict a change in last mile buyer behavior?
How do you predict a change in the last mile buyer behavior? Well, okay, let me answer it in this manner. The OODA loop, frankly, has nothing to do with prediction. The OODA loop is essentially all about testing a particular hypothesis or a decision that I have taken, seeing how well it sort of led to, my objective being met or not met, and then coming back and again creating a new mental model and taking a new decision and action. So, if I have not been to answer this question specifically, let's say that I understood the buyer behavior to an extent, but I could not understand it fully as to what it might, how the last mile, as you say, quote unquote, last mile buyer behavior might impact. I can create a hypothesis, take that action, and then see to what extent it worked for me or not. But if you really, I'm sorry, let me see if I can go back. See, buyer behavior really, if you are talking about, say, whether it is last mile or it is the sense that you are making about the buyer behavior. Customers profiling, what he thinks, his mindset, and so on and so forth. And you do that by asking yourself these kind of questions. This is for aviation. You have to see how these apply as far as your domain is concerned. Yeah. Did I answer the question? Yeah. Hi, Jaram.
The next question is from Lokesh. He's asking, there is a connect from add to observe at the top, not the bottom. What does that mean? So connection is
okay. Well, I wish I knew, but let me just see. Let me just go back to how it looks in terms of I'm going to the main loop here. So the good news is that I can see a loop going back from not only from the top but also from the bottom. So because you are actually testing, it's a learning process. So as you take action and you see to an extent you have achieved or not achieved, you actually allow that to go back to two areas of this observed stage, as you can see. One is, of course, if something did not work, then this should form as the database for doing a implicit guidance and control in the observed stage. The second is, as you can see, it goes into an unfolding interaction environment, which means, because I did something and I tested it, and again it did not work to an extent, I see this as an input coming in from the environment, and I use that in the observed state as part of my data collection process. Lokesh, I'm not sure if I answered your question, but that's all I could think of. But maybe you can maybe think of it in a slightly different fashion, and I'm happy to hear from you.
And he's asking the arrow on top is bidirectional, and it's just in the back.
I beg your pardon?
Arrow on top is bidirectional.
Arrow top is bidirectional. Well, you know, I did not make this particular loop design, but I would suspect it is because when you are taking an action, certain implicit controls and guidance which I have, certain do's and don'ts will play a role in my final action. That is why I think it is shown in this bidirectional manner. So that part, the control and the guidance part, may actually need not have to go through the orient and decide stage. It is actually when I'm doing something, I bring that up. Hi, love, good to see you.
If anyone wants to ask questions, please let me know in chat. I can unmute also. You can come on audio and ask also. Just let me know. And Lokesh is, yeah, he's saying he got what you're saying. He got the answer for his question.
Thank you, Lokesh. Thank you. And thank you for coming.
I request if anyone wants to come on audio and you want to share or ask questions, please let me know in chat. I can unmute you. I don't see any. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think somebody asked a question just now.
Yeah, sir, from Devashish, he has put a long thing. Devashish, should you?
Yeah, Devashish, I'm wondering how to shift the process, how to bring the habitual shift and correction. Is it possible to fly in the sky by stopping this new model? I couldn't understand this. Is it possible to fish? Possible a fish to fly in the sky? Fish to fly in the sky? That's okay. I don't know in what this thing context Devashish was saying this, but I did talk about something, you know, when we were looking at the orient stage, and I will repeat it. You need to be quite clear about your own intrinsic competences and what are not there. So my competences need to be, of course, there when I am, you know, creating that mind model to make a judgment of the new information and the situation and the circumstance that I am seeing out there. And of course, a fish may actually have, you know, aspirations to fly, but I don't think it has the competence to fly, so it will not be. Just like a bird, it may have the competence to fly, but may not be able to live underwater. So that would be the response.
Thanks, sir. We don't have any more questions. We can just wait for 2 minutes and then we can.
Yeah, I have no problem. I'm here. I can answer somebody. I would like, again, I encourage you, please use this model in your day-to-day. It may sound all, otherwise, you know, it's all theory. Personally, I can tell you this, if you practice shifting your mental models, and I'm saying this from some amount of conviction because I believe I'm able to do that to quite an extent. May not be very well, but I try. You know, it immediately, you will see two things. One is, of course, the kind of conflicts that we see happening in organizations, because we are held into very, you know, rigid kind of positions, because, you know, those positions are based on our mental models. That rigidification and the conflicts reduce, number one. Number two, the kind of possibilities that I can sort of follow open up. Earlier, where there was only one possibility, suddenly I can start seeing 3 or 4. And that is why I'm again repeating. Please, for heaven's sake, practice this. Every day as you get in new information, do not try to fit that new information into your old mind model, old system, old process. Bring it in and see how, whether if at all, the old mind model system process could actually need a change. Anyone else?
Hello?
Yeah.
Yes, sir. From Lokesh, there is a question again. The speed of OODA would be key to get competitive advantage. However, the regulatory environment reaction to your action need to be predicted. For example, in payment, my domain, the digital payments are becoming important. If that's not one's core competence, how does one shift to digital payments?
That's an excellent question, Lokesh, and I frankly do not have your domain expertise or knowledge in terms of domain digital payments. The only thought that comes to my mind here is it's a mindset. Hello, it's a mindset really. At the end of the day, I have two choices really. I can sort of do much more comprehensive data analysis, data massaging, and trying to understand trends before I take a decision. That's nothing wrong. Many of us do that, and that works also many times. But in an environment where there is no experiential background behind me, that does not work, is what OODA says. So fundamentally, whatever you are seeing at this point in time and how you can make sense using your mental models is how you should move forward. And certain things, for example, you cannot change. A regulatory impact on your business, you cannot change. It's not under your control. But the way you actually are looking at the process, I mean, do I sort of, I mean, it's a mindset really. Do I, the regulatory thing is very slow, so no point doing anything about it, or I will do this much and wait, let the regulatory thing sort of come on par, then I will take action. That's one way of looking at it. The second is, whatever is in my control, I use it to speed up my OODA loop. I will in any case, even if I'm getting, I and every competitor gets hampered by the same regulatory environment, I would still be better off than my competitor. This is what the OODA loop actually says.
The next question is tips on practicing daily from Shakti.
I beg your pardon?
We are asking give tips on practicing daily. So I think they meant OODA loop to practice daily.
Like I said, the only practice that you can do is in the Orient state. That is the most powerful practice, which is, you are at your workplace, you are getting new information in. Rather than trying to fit that new information into what you already know, what you think has worked in the past, and you try to fit that in, and sometimes you force fit that. Just ask yourself a question: does this new information allow me to change the process, the system, my thinking with regard to this particular situation? Just ask this question yourself every time. Every day. You don't have to ask it every, for all your decisions, because that at least ask once during that day. Once during that day, ask that question and see whether it actually requires you to change your mind model, mental model, and then use that mental model to look at that situation again. That is the only practice I would really suggest to anyone and everyone.
There is a comment, I think, thank you, Mishra. I think he's saying it's shifting your mental model to open your possibilities. This is such a priceless insight in this presentation. Thanks, Mishra, for that message. And the next question is, one second, I'm just scrolling. any comparison with modified PDCA cycle, OPDCA cycle, and OODA cycle?
Well, I don't know who's asking this. I'm an ignoramus. I do not know much about PDCA and OPDCA, so I really cannot comment about I cannot do a comparison. But what I can do now, since you have brought it to my notice, I'll study these two cycles, and then if there is anything I sort of find, I can always try and share it with Sushma, and she could then sort of maybe share it with you. Yeah, PDCA, the Japanese model, I've heard about, but I really am not a practitioner, nor do I know. But each of these models, one way or the other, have a particular strength, and there is nothing to detract. And it is not a question of, oh, can I do this or can I do that? I can learn the powerful aspects from each of the models and try to apply as far as my working is concerned, and that's what then empowers me to become a better manager and a better leader. But if you look at PDCA, Plan, Do, Check, Act is in a way quite similar to what OODA is telling us, except that it does in another way. Yeah, here we are talking about the OODA came because our good friend Mr. John Boyd was a fighter pilot, and when you are a fighter pilot in the air, and there is an enemy aircraft, there is no past precedent. You need to be observing whatever is around you at that moment in time and take action. So the OODA actually comes from that mindset. But why it becomes very relevant for today's kind of environment is because there is huge uncertainty, unpredictability. We have heard about VUCA, right? So that is increasingly becoming stronger in terms of its speed, as far as the business environment is concerned and all other environments. So in that situation, I think the OODA is a very powerful tool. If I look at a PDCA kind of a thing, I mean, what can I plan when I don't even know? There is no past precedent. I have no past information. What do I plan on? And if I cannot plan, then how do I decide? So that would be the kind of questioning I'll have.
Okay. The next again, for aviation industry, for example, if one does dynamic pricing, how will government reaction?
That is the point. Today the government, your regulatory authority may not allow, but it's a question at the end of the day of the industry coming together. So if the situation is such where I need to do dynamic pricing, because otherwise, there is a possibility of my closing down, because if I'm not able to utilize at least a base level of inventory, in terms of then, tomorrow I'm not interested in doing the business anymore, right? That can happen. That happens also. So it's always a communication. You will be. That's why if you look at the inquiry, I will just go back. It's not again. I don't know why it sort of gets stuck, but what I will show you was if you look at in this I think it's in the you look at the last the inquiry question here, and it says, in view of the new regulatory framework, how do we engage with governments and regulatory authorities? Now, creating standards for hygiene, but also operations. I am an operator, and I need to give an overall smooth customer experience. So, the regulator, of course, will think. The regulator will also have to start thinking out of the box, and it's happening. It's not that today you see it all around. When the going gets tough, I mean, people do become flexible. the government is very, very flexible today compared to what they were earlier. So that is what I would recommend. Dynamic pricing is something once upon a time it was frowned upon. I mean, when I was younger. Today, it is actually the norm within certain guidelines. Tomorrow, the guidelines can be also shifted. The goalposts continue to shift.
Yeah.
I don't know if I
the next
answered the
one
question.
is yeah.
Yeah.
Can this model work on fixing salaries month-wise instead of long-term?
I beg your pardon?
Can this model work on salaries month-wise?
Salaries?
Yes, they are asking like, can this model work on fixing salaries month-wise instead of long-term?
That's a great question. I've never thought of that. To be very frank, salaries, how the model would salaries, is a bit of a sticky situation because salaries depend a lot on two things really. The organizational perception about the value somebody brings onto the table, and the individual's perception about the value he is adding, as far as the organization is concerned. So that particular trade-off or that particular link which is there is something which actually would determine salaries. So I see the OODA loop. I don't think can be applied to something like salaries, in that manner, because salaries are salaries because you need to keep your people motivated. You need to get the best out of your people in terms of productivity. And the loop as such is really not delving into that. The loop is talking about how you could, first of all, keep on doing fast decision making, and also be better than your competitors. So, I mean, that's my response. I can't think of anything how the loop can be used for salaries.
Yes,
but the loop could be used. When I think of it, it could be used in some manner, in a fashion for talent acquisition. That you could.
So we don't have more. We are almost done.
Okay.
Starting the presentation, I think the recording session will be uploaded on YouTube. Someone is asking, or someone. You can access the recording of the session on YouTube in a couple of days. In IIMB,
that one, in any case, you are going to be uploading, no?
What is that? Yeah.
I mean, as far as the IIMB is concerned, you will keep that recording on your database.
Yeah, database also that we have, and it is there in YouTube channel. So anytime that you just go and access.
No, YouTube. Okay, I don't have this recording on YouTube, but I do have
I will be uploading them. I will
explain in a shorter manner on YouTube, but that's a very, very short presentation. It's just about 5 minutes.
What I meant is like this whole session, webinar session will be uploaded, the recording of this session.
Yeah.
So on YouTube in under IIMB Alumni Webinar channel. So I request participants to just go in a couple of, maybe on Monday, just check the channel, it will be there. You can just access all the, you can see the PPT. I meant the file, it's PPT, not PPT file, I meant the session, you can just go and take particular slide if you want to, take a screenshot, or you can save it.
Yeah. You could do that, yeah, of course.
Yeah. So I think so we are almost at the end of the session. We don't see any more questions. Yeah. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Actually, you're taking your time and presenting us the session, and I see all participants are all giving good feedback in the chat window. So yeah, and thanks for all for joining also, and thank you for taking your time and joining this session. Yeah, and there is a feedback form. I request all of you to please fill the form. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Siva. Thank you, everyone, to being there. I hope I could, add some value, and feel free to reach out to me directly also, in case you have any specific concerns or queries relevant to your area. My email is given here. Give me a shout, and I should be able to respond to you pretty fast. Okay, guys, all the very best, and thank you once again.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.